Hello, my name is Sharon Ahmed and I am officially a second year medical student. I passed my first year exams and this is everything that I would do differently if I were to repeat my first year of med school all over again. Let's get into it. Now for context, I'm in graduate entry medical school, so my first year of med school was the 2 to 2.5 years of preclinical content that you would get in undergrad med condensed into a 25-week period. I wish I had this advice when I was starting, so here you go. Now the first thing is, if you're coming into first year med school of any med school, so undergrad or graduate entry, enjoy this summer break, because especially for graduate entry, this is one of the last summer breaks that you're going to get in its entirety. And I say that now standing here as a second year med student in my summer break currently, because if I were to fail one or both of my previous exams, then I would be sitting those exams in my summer break, so I would have little to no summer break left. Or if I were to repeat the entire first year again, if I'd failed my exams and the resits, so I'd be resitting the entire year essentially, I'd probably spend the time revising as well, so I essentially would have no summer holiday. So make sure to take this time to relax, disconnect, and just enjoy the time you have off, because once you're in and there's no turning back, and it's all full steam ahead from day one. So throughout your day there'll be loads of little empty spaces and little pockets of time, so 5 minutes here, 20 minutes there, 15 minutes there, and what myself and a lot of other students would tend to do is just doom scroll on TikTok all day, every day. These little pockets of time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour sometimes, would accumulate, and in 25 weeks, at least Warwick does 25 weeks, I'm not sure how long other med schools do. Within those 25 weeks, those kind of pockets of time accumulate to a lot of wasted time by the time you reach your exams. So towards the latter part of the year, I started using these pockets of times to engage with MCQ questions or just brush through my lecture material for the sessions that I had planned that day, and I found that that helped a lot, and it also made me not get into a slump. I wouldn't feel kind of like you'd get that kind of icky feeling of, oh, I haven't done anything today. At least I do. So even if it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes here and there, I still felt like I did something and I engaged with something and I was being productive. Definitely fill those little empty spaces and empty pockets of time from day one. And I know a lot of the questions that are on PassMed and things like that aren't catered towards kind of the first few formative lectures. At least I found they were really difficult. I only started engaging with PassMed towards the later part of my year. Input the lectures into ChatGPT and ask it to generate some questions for you, and that is more than enough to kind of consolidate a lecture, I think, or just brush through a lecture. And I would do that while I was eating breakfast, so I'd have like a spare 10 minutes and I'd ask ChatGPT to give me a 10-item MCQ based on like my lecture slides, or I would go on PassMed again later on in the year, where I understood the PassMed questions, and I do like 10 or 25 questions on there, or I just use the Yankee Decks on my iPad, because 10 minutes would amount to a lot by the time you reach the exams, and it may be content that you touch once and never look over again, so you'd be lucky to have kind of that 10 minutes spent on that content and never coming back to it again. At least you would have done something. If you're really struggling with time and struggling to do or get through all the content, what I would recommend is at least do a first pass on everything. Now what I mean by first pass is go through your lecture in its entirety. Just go through everything at least once, because even if you never go through it again, or even if you never revise it or retain the information, somewhere in your brain, whether you're conscious of it or not, you will have the information stored somewhere. And when it comes to exam day and you see a question, it may just trigger something in your brain, and you may kind of just subconsciously recognize the answer, like, oh, it's not that answer, it's probably this because I remember reading it somewhere. That's when your first pass kind of may kick in. So if you can't get through all the content in depth and in detail and retain everything, at least do a first pass of all the content that you have. I think that's your best bet on breadth, rather than kind of going into the nuances and the depth of everything. Just go for breadth and go through everything at least once. Now this next part is related to more the clinical side. So as I mentioned, I'm in graduate entry med school, so we get clinical exposure pretty early. I think within our first month we had like community placement days, which was kind of clinical. You're meeting with patients but in a community setting rather than in a hospital setting, but I'd still argue it's quite clinical, because you are meeting with real patients and sometimes you're meeting them in their homes. So this is my ward book. I keep this in my scrub pocket either here or down below, And I take this on the wards with me and also to the learning sessions before going into the wards with the tutors, and I put kind of any feedback or little tidbits of information written down in here. And after each session, so we would have to write a little reflective piece of what we learned, how we engage with the patient, so either doing a physical examination or a history, and we'd have to reflect on our experience and things we'd do in future. And a lot of the time when it came to writing those reflections, because I'd write it at the end of the week and my session was at the start of the week, I'd forget a lot of the stuff I'd done in the session, even though I wrote like some of the feedback down. With regard to the actual kind of patient side of things, we'd see like a few patients that day too, so I wouldn't really have a clear view of any one particular patient. They kind of all jumbled together in my head. So towards the later part of my sessions, I started keeping a pad of post-it notes at the back of my book. So this is just kind of general like feedback and things like that. There's no patient data in there at all. And then at the back, I would keep a post-it note. So I would write anonymized, confidential patient data. So no identifiers, no date of birth, no name, no patient ID, nothing like that. Just their kind of gender, what they came in with, and what I did specifically within that patient session. So if I did the examination, if I did the history taking, and then I'd write about that patient in my reflective log, and then I'd take the post-it note, rip it up and throw it away. So that way I'm still maintaining confidentiality and anonymity because the data is generic. So yeah, I started doing that later on and I found that really helped. So I'm not violating anything and it does help a lot with reflections. So definitely do that if you're struggling with remembering for your reflections. From day one, start making your revision resources. Now, I don't mean to go full-blown into revision mode. You don't need to make an 8-hour study timetable from day one. I'm not saying to revise from day one, but I'm saying to make your revision resources from day one. Now, what I mean by that is whatever lecture materials or notes you're taking, condense those into your revision resources straight away. So how I would go about doing this is using my 10 block method, which you guys can see in my first pinned video on my profile because it's really long-winded to put into this video, but watch my pinned video. And I would do that to create my revision resources straight away from day one. The reason why I didn't do that from day one is because I discovered that method and I created that method for myself so late. I was literally in my last term. I would go through my lecture, make my notes, but then I would take my lecture notes and make my revision resources straight away, whether it be Notion, flashcards, Anki cards, whatever have you. I would make those resources straight away because later down the line, if you haven't made those resources already, you're gonna panic and do what I did and try and make all your resources around exam time, which is not what you want to be doing, because those minutes and hours that you're wasting making the resources you could put into retaining and recalling information, but instead you're making resources. And of course there are older students Anki decks, but what I found was a lot of the Anki decks either were incorrect or they didn't have the same information that we had because the information changes between the years, and also they were written in a way that wasn't tailored to my brain because obviously it was someone else's Anki deck. So I was just creating my own Anki decks or my own Anki cards and adding it into that deck instead. So I wish I'd just done that from day one and just created my own Anki cards straight from my resources because it would be tailored to me. But obviously by the time I reached the conclusion that the Anki decks weren't that good, it was too late. I was already in the thick of exam season, so I'd wish that I created my revision resources from day one, even though I'm not going to revise from day one, but I'd have the resources there for when the time came, because all that time would be wasted in creating resources and you'd have so little time to practice using those resources. So your time would definitely be wasted if you're making resources later on rather than making it early and then using the time later on to use those resources and effectively revise. I think that is everything. I don't think I've missed anything out. If you guys do have any more questions or anything you'd like me to answer, let me know in the comments down below. And I know some of you guys are setting your UCATs and revising for your MMIs coming up. Good luck with all of that. Let me know how it goes. I'll probably make a video on some UCAT tips and MMI tips soon. I'm still recovering from my wisdom tooth surgery, so sorry about that. That's everything that I would do differently if I were to repeat my first year all over again. And again, check out the 10 block method. It really does work. It was a lifesaver for my last term of med school. I wish I'd used it sooner, but obviously I didn't have the knowledge at the time. So hopefully you guys do now have that knowledge going into your first year. Good luck everyone, and I'll see you guys very, very soon. Bye.